Claire Ashwood had a particular kind of calm that made difficult people angrier before it made them quieter. She had learned this early, not from a management seminar or a book with a glossy cover, but from 7 years of standing between wealthy clients and their expectations in spaces where the art cost more than most people's homes. Alara Gallery occupied the ground floor of a restored Beaux-Arts building on North Camden Drive in Beverly Hills, and on a Tuesday morning in late October, it smelled of eucalyptus and fresh linen. Two things the gallery director had decided were the scent of discretion. Claire was crossing the main floor with a portfolio under her arm when she heard Mr. Douglas Fenner before she saw him. He wasn't loud in the way of someone who had lost control. He was loud in the way of someone who had always been loud and had never once been told to stop. His voice carried from the consultation alcove near the back wall, where a junior coordinator named Nora Spence was holding a printed acquisition sheet with both hands and the expression of someone trying very hard not to look scared. "This is not the piece I approved," Fenner was saying. "The provenance documentation is incomplete. The installation timeline has moved twice and nobody from your team has returned a single call in 48 hours. Nora opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Claire placed the portfolio on the nearest flat surface and walked toward the alcove with the unhurried pace of someone retrieving something she had left there earlier. "Mr. Fenner." She stopped beside Nora, just close enough to make the triangle clear. "I'm Claire Ashwood, Senior Events Coordinator. I understand there are some concerns about the Morales acquisition." Fenner turned to look at her. He was the kind of man who assessed people by what they were wearing before deciding if they were worth his time. Claire was wearing a steel blue blazer and the expression of someone who had already decided how this conversation would end. "Concerns," he repeated. "I have a $3 million wall in my Malibu dining room that is currently blank because your gallery failed to deliver a piece we agreed on in writing 6 weeks ago." "We did agree," Claire said. She took the acquisition sheet gently from Nora's hands and looked at it, not because she needed to. She had already memorized the file, but because it gave Fenner a moment to watch her work. "The original Morales piece sustained humidity damage during transport. We notified your assistant last Thursday. The replacement we sourced is a 2019 canvas from the same series, same dimensions, and carries a higher auction estimate. The provenance documentation is complete. It arrived this morning." A brief silence. "My assistant didn't tell me." "That's a conversation for you and your assistant," Claire said without missing a beat. "But the piece is here, and if you'd like to see it before installation, I can walk you back now." Fenner stared at her for a moment. She waited. "Fine," he said. Nora exhaled quietly through her nose. As Claire turned to lead Fenner toward the storage room, she caught a movement from the corner of her eye. Near the gallery entrance, leaning against one of the structural columns with his arms loosely crossed, was a man she didn't recognize. He looked to be in his late 30s, wearing a charcoal jacket without a tie, the kind of casual that takes effort. He wasn't pretending to look at the art. He was watching the alcove with clear, uncomplicated attention. Claire filed that away and kept walking. His name, she found out 20 minutes later, was Landon Pierce. She found it out because Nora appeared at the storage room doorway while Claire was finishing the paperwork with Fenner, and whispered that a Mr. Pierce was asking for the gallery director. "Director Renata is in a call until noon," Nora said. "He says he has a 2 o'clock with her and wanted to confirm. Tell him the director will meet him in the main conference room at 2. Offer him coffee. Use the good cups." Nora disappeared. Fenner, now considerably calmer, signed the final installation form and left with the posture of someone who had arrived intending to win a fight and was privately relieved it hadn't come to that. Claire straightened the paperwork. She was on her way back to her desk when she heard a voice behind her. "Does that happen often?" She turned. Landon Pierce was standing at the edge of the hallway, coffee in hand. He had clearly not gone to the conference room yet. "Which part?" she asked. "Someone coming in ready to burn the place down and leaving satisfied." Claire tilted her head. "It happens when the problem is real and the solution is faster than the argument." He looked at her for a moment with the focused kind of attention that some people are born with and most people learn to fake. He didn't smile. He was just paying attention. "Landon Pierce," he said, "I have a meeting at 2. "I know. The conference room is at the end of the East Hall. Nora can show you." "I found it," he said. "I was just walking." People don't usually walk through the staff corridor. "I've been here before," he said it simply, not as a boast. Then he nodded once, a gesture that somehow managed to be a thank you and a goodbye at the same time, and walked back toward the main gallery. Claire watched him go for approximately 2 seconds, then she went back to work. They crossed paths twice more that week. Once in the east hallway when Claire was managing a last-minute frame swap, and Landon was coming from the upper mezzanine with 2 people she didn't recognize, both laughing at something he'd said. One of them, broad-shouldered with the easy confidence of someone who had never worked a service job in his life, glanced at Claire and called out, "Hey, can someone tell me where the Hartwell piece moved? It was on the north wall yesterday." The Hartwell was relocated to the secondary room to improve sightlines for the upcoming installation, Claire said without changing direction. There's also a floor map available at the welcome desk, which is active during all gallery hours. The man blinked. The second friend, shorter and wearing wire-rimmed glasses, turned away to compose himself. Landon looked at his shoes for a moment. "Wade," he said evenly, "she's right, use the map." Wade opened his mouth, closed it. The second encounter was in the service elevator at the end of Thursday. Claire stepped in with a clipboard. Landon stepped in half a minute later. The elevator rose 4 floors in a silence that was not uncomfortable so much as it was specific. The kind that exists between 2 people who have already decided something about each other but haven't yet said what. "You relocated the Hartwell," he said when they reached the 3rd floor. The north wall placement competed with the OC piece. Visitors were stopping in the wrong place. "You read traffic patterns." "I read the space." She glanced at him. 4 years in this building teaches you where people stop moving and where they keep walking." Landon stood quietly for a moment. "You talk about this place like you own it," he said, not critically, more like someone noting a specific quality of material. "I know how to take care of it," she said. "That's different." The elevator opened. She stepped out first. That evening, she was retrieving her jacket from the staff closet near the loading dock when she heard Wade's voice drifting through the propped exterior door. 50 says she already knows who he is and is playing it cool. "She doesn't know," came Landon's voice, measured. 100 says that when she finds out, everything changes. This was the man with the glasses, Spencer, she had since learned. Not because she's shallow, because the situation changes. It always does. She won't change. "You sound very certain for someone who talked to her in an elevator." A pause. "The meeting at 2, she didn't even flinch when Renata introduced me as co-owner. She just kept taking notes." "Wait," Wade's voice sharpened. "She was in that meeting?" "She set it up. She was taking installation minutes." Another pause, longer this time. "And she didn't say anything?" "Not a word." Claire stood in the staff closet with her jacket in her hands and the absolute stillness of someone whose brain has just moved faster than her feet. Co-owner. She thought of the way he had walked through the east corridor the first day, not exploring, not admiring, inspecting. She thought of the way Director Renata had spoken to him at 2 o'clock, with the particular deference she reserved for people who signed checks. She put on her jacket, she filed everything away, and she went home. She was pulling espresso the next morning when Nora appeared in the break room doorway with an expression that existed somewhere between delighted and terrified. "There's something you should know," Nora said. "There usually is." "About Mr. Pierce." "He co-owns the gallery." Claire set the cup down. "I know." Nora stared. "Since when?" "Since yesterday." Claire picked up her cup. "His name is on the lease documents in the archives room. I checked last night." "And you didn't? You've been talking to him like he's a person who walked into a gallery." She looked at Nora steadily. "Which is what he is. What would you have me do differently?" Nora opened her mouth, closed it, then quietly, "Nothing, I think." "Good." Claire finished her espresso. "Send the Fenner installation confirmation to his assistant before 10. What she didn't know, what she had no reason to know, was that Spencer had said something to Wade the night before as they left the restaurant on Melrose, and Wade had mentioned it to the weekend receptionist, and the weekend receptionist had an unfortunate habit of talking during the Monday morning setup. By Tuesday, a version of the story had reached 3 members of the install crew, and, with the particular efficiency of gossip in contained spaces, a filtered version had arrived at the second-floor workroom. Claire found out from the lighting technician, of all people. He said it without thinking, the way people say things when they assume everyone already knows, so the guys were betting whether you'd act different once you knew Pierce owned the place. Spencer had money on yes. She set down the cable she was holding. The technician went pale. "Thank you," she said, and she walked to the conference room on the second floor without knocking. Landon was there alone, reviewing something on his laptop. Wade and Spencer were not present, which was either convenient or unfortunate, depending on how the next 5 minutes went. He looked up. "I need 2 minutes," she said. He closed the laptop. She put both hands on the edge of the table, not leaning in, just grounded. "The story about the bet has reached the install crew. I heard it this morning from someone who didn't know I hadn't been told." She looked at him directly. "Did you know they were talking about it?" Landon didn't look away. "I told them to stop. I should have told you." "Yes, you should have." "I know. I'm not a punchline." She said it without heat, which somehow made it more final than anger would have. "I'm not a variable in someone's hypothesis about how women respond to money. I have worked in this building for 4 years, and my name means something here. When that name starts circulating attached to a bet, it stops meaning what I built it to mean." "You're right, no deflection, no qualification." She studied him for a moment. "Tell them to address it," and she left. That afternoon, Renata Burke requested a meeting. Renata had been at Alara 11 years. She had the posture of someone who had outlasted 3 gallery directors and considered herself the institutional memory of the building. She sat across from Claire in her office with a client relations report open in front of her, and she spoke in the precise, pleasant voice of someone who has learned that tone is more useful than volume. "There's been a question raised," Renata said, "about the Fenner acquisition file, specifically, whether certain purchase details were shared with a contact at Meridian Contemporary before the deal closed." Claire was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "What kind of details?" "Budget ceiling. Private ceiling. The number Fenner authorized internally." Renata slid a single printed page across the desk. "The Meridian director reached out to Fenner's assistant last week with a competing offer that matched our internal number to within $5,000. Claire looked at the sheet. It was a log of file access. Her name was on 3 entries. "I accessed the Fenner file to prepare the replacement documentation," she said. "All 3 entries are from the morning we sourced the Morales substitute. The information in those entries does not include purchase ceiling figures. That's a separate authorization layer I don't have access to. The log shows your credentials." "The log shows my name. That's not the same thing." She set the sheet on the desk. "When was the Meridian approach made?" "Last Thursday. Last Thursday I was in the Hartwell installation meeting from 1 to 4 and at a vendor walkthrough until 6:30. Both are in the shared calendar with sign-in sheets." She folded her hands. "I would like to know how the internal authorization figures were accessed and from which terminal." Renata's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A fraction of delay, like a system loading one beat too long. "That's what the review will determine," Renata said. "Then I'll look forward to the review." Claire stood, picked up her bag, and left. She went directly to Nora's desk and said quietly, "Pull the terminal access log for the second-floor director suite from last Thursday. The physical log, not the digital copy. Don't send it anywhere. Just hold it." Nora looked up. "Is something happening?" "I don't know yet," Claire said, "but I want the paperwork when I find out." It took 48 hours. The gallery's IT consultant, brought in because Alara's internal team had a conflict of interest when the access pointed toward senior staff, found it on a Thursday morning and called Landon before noon. The terminal in the Client Relations Office, Floor 2, had been accessed at 9:47 p.m. on the previous Wednesday, the evening of the gallery's private preview event, when most of the building was occupied with catering teardown and Renata Burke had returned to the floor to retrieve a document. The camera footage from the corridor showed her badge entry and her exit 17 minutes later. The files accessed included the Fenner authorization ceiling. Landon called Claire from the parking structure. "The investigation is done," he said when she answered. She was at her kitchen counter with coffee going cold in front of her. "And?" "The terminal access was from Director Burke's office on the night of the preview. Your credentials were used from inside a session already authenticated on her workstation." A pause. "Someone manually entered your login information from her machine." Claire sat with that for a moment. "How long has she been sending information out?" "IT flagged patterns going back 14 months. 2 other client files, both with active competitors." "Does she know the investigation is finished?" Not yet. There's a board call at 10 tomorrow morning. He paused. I wanted you to hear it before anyone else. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Thank you. Claire. He said her name differently than he said other words, more careful somehow. I'm sorry. Not just for the bet. For the sequence of it, finding out from a technician, the meeting with Renata, having to defend yourself with a document you pulled yourself because nobody pulled it for you. She was quiet. That was on me, he said, all of it. She stared at her coffee. It was on both of you and on me a little for not saying something sooner. She paused, but mostly on you. I know. She almost smiled. Almost. Good night, Mr. Pierce. A beat. Good night, Claire. The board call the next morning lasted 40 minutes. Renata Burke arrived in the conference room on the second floor with the same composure she brought everywhere, and it held for approximately the first 12 minutes. The IT consultant presented the terminal logs. The corridor footage ran on the main screen in a quiet loop. Her badge entry at 9:47, her exit at 10:04. Landon presented the flagged client files from the previous 14 months. I was protecting the gallery's negotiating position, Renata said, and her voice was completely level. The Meridian approach was a controlled test. You shared a private client's authorized ceiling with a competitor, Landon said. The test resulted in that client nearly taking his business elsewhere. He closed the folder. You've been here 11 years, Renata. You know what that means. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the security officer who had appeared in the doorway during the presentation, and something in her face settled. Not defeat, exactly, but the particular stillness of someone who has stopped calculating exits. She left without speaking again. Afterward, Landon found Claire in the east hallway, where she was checking sightlines on a new installation. She didn't hear him coming, or maybe she did and chose not to turn immediately. Either way, she was standing in front of a large-scale photograph of the Mojave at dawn when he stopped beside her. It's done, he said. She nodded once, Nora texted. He stood beside her looking at the photograph. The colors were all burnt orange and deep blue, the kind of light that only exists for about 11 minutes before the sun decides to finish rising. You were right about the Hartwell wall, he said after a moment. The OC piece is doing something different in that corner. Better. The light hits it from the east in the afternoon. The north wall is flat light all day. You see things that people with art degrees sometimes miss. She glanced at him sideways, or I just pay attention. Same thing, he said, in the right person. She let that sit for a moment. Then she looked back at the photograph. I put in my resignation this morning, she said. He turned to look at her. No. It's not a question, she said it simply. I won the investigation. The correct person was identified. The evidence was clear. She turned to face him. And I walked into work today and 3 people looked away when I passed them in the lobby. Not because they think I'm guilty. The ones who matter know what happened. But because my name spent a week attached to something I didn't do, and now every decision I make here will be filtered through that. I can fix the environment. You can't unsend the memos, she said, and you can't unknow that I had to defend myself in a room where I was the only one who came prepared. She wasn't angry. That was the thing about Claire Ashwood. When she was most serious, she was also most still. I choose my dignity. It's not about you. It's about what I need to be able to look at myself at the end of the day. Landon was quiet for a long time. 30 days, he said. Contract terms, yes. In 30 days I want the door to still be open. He held her gaze. On my side it will be. She studied him. Something in her expression shifted, not much, but the way a compass needle shifts when it finds its direction. Very slightly, very finally. Take care of the gallery, she said, and she walked back down the hall. He drove to her apartment 12 days later on a Saturday with the specific expression of someone who has been rehearsing something for the entire drive and is now standing on the sidewalk reconsidering the draft. She opened the door with a bowl of cereal in her hand. He looked at the bowl. It's 7 in the evening. I'm aware, she leaned against the doorframe. What are you doing here? I owe you an actual apology, not the one I gave on the phone. He looked at her directly. Can I come in? She considered this for approximately 3 seconds. Then she stepped back. He walked in. Her apartment was small and specific, a bookshelf that mixed design theory with short story collections in no apparent order, a good lamp in the corner with a plant underneath it being taken very seriously, a window that looked out over the courtyard of the building next door, rather than any particular view worth mentioning. He looked at the window for a moment without speaking. When I saw the investigation develop, he said, turning back to her, I prioritized containing the damage to the gallery before protecting you inside it. I told myself those were the same goal. He stopped. They weren't. She set her cereal bowl on the counter. You came prepared to that meeting with evidence you pulled yourself, he continued, because you knew no one would pull it for you, and I was the person who could have made that unnecessary and didn't. He didn't look away. That's what I should have said on the phone. The apartment was quiet. It's more than I expected, she said finally. I practiced. I can tell. She looked at him for a long moment. Sit down. They sat at opposite ends of the couch, her with her feet tucked under her, him with his elbows on his knees, and she said, Tell me about the co-ownership, the parts that aren't in the public record. He glanced at her. Spencer. Spencer said everything changes when she finds out everything. That word was too big for what I already knew. She tilted her head. So what's the rest? He was quiet for a moment. Then my father started Alara 26 years ago, 2 locations, then 5. He retired 6 years ago and divided ownership between myself and my younger sister, who has never worked a gallery day in her life, lives in Portland, and has very defined opinions about how the business should operate. I hold 53%. She holds 47%. He looked at the window. When anyone gets close to me in any context that isn't purely professional, she finds out, and she uses it as leverage in whatever board disagreement we're currently navigating. The suggestion being that my judgment is compromised. Has she ever met someone you were actually close to? Once, he paused. It was not a clean situation. Claire studied him. So when Spencer said everything changes, he meant the structural complications around you. He meant that getting involved with me comes with a blueprint that most people don't want to read. He met her eyes. I'm telling you because you had the right to know before anything else. You still do. She sat with that. Does your sister have a case? She asked, legally. Not without my father's votes. And your father? A pause, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite pain, but the specific weight of something unresolved. He calls when he thinks I'm losing focus on the original vision, which in his language means when something personal is distracting me from work. He said it flatly, like a phrase he had translated too many times. He called twice last week. Before or after the investigation? Both. She nodded slowly. Outside the window, a light went on in the apartment across the courtyard. Someone moved past it without looking out. You're telling me this because you want me to decide something, she said. I'm telling you because you asked and because, he stopped. Started again, because the people who don't ask are usually the ones I'd rather not tell. She looked at him for a long moment. The lamp in the corner made the room warmer than it had been 5 minutes ago. Or maybe that was just the conversation settling into something. I'll think about the job, she said. The 30 days aren't up. I know. And whatever else you're trying to say. She looked at him carefully. Say it cleaner next time. You're better at honesty than you are at implication. He looked at her for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the direction of one, the way weather changes before rain. All right, he said, I will. He left at 9. She stood at the window for a while after, looking at the light in the apartment across the courtyard. Ordinary yellow light, someone's kitchen table, no view to speak of, and found herself thinking that a window didn't need to look at anything extraordinary to be worth standing at. She called him the next evening. I have a condition, she said when he answered. A brief pause. Tell me. If anything with your sister, your father, or the ownership structure involves my name, or involves me in any way, I hear about it directly from you, before anyone else, before any lawyer or board member, not after. Agreed. And the Fenner wall on the 3rd floor landing, the lighting is wrong and it's been wrong for 2 months. I want it fixed before the December preview. Silence. Then, you walked back in and the first thing you noticed was a lighting problem. The first thing I noticed was 3 things. The lighting was the most fixable. A pause. Do we have a deal? We have a deal. And then quietly, are you coming back? She looked out the window. The light across the courtyard was off now. The courtyard itself was the particular gray-blue of a November evening in Los Angeles, which was not dramatic and not beautiful in any postcard sense, but was completely itself. Monday, she said. Fix the lighting before I get there. He laughed. A quick, real laugh, the kind that escapes before the decision to let it. She heard it clearly. Good night, Claire. Good night. She put the phone down and finished making dinner, moving around her small kitchen with the particular ease of someone who has made a decision and stopped arguing with it. 6 weeks later, on the morning of Valera's winter preview, the largest event on the gallery calendar, 60 guests, 3 new acquisitions, the Hartwell finally back on the north wall where it had always been meant to be. Claire arrived 40 minutes early and found the east hallway lighting already adjusted. Every fixture, correct angle, the kind of warm, diffused quality that made visitors stop in front of a canvas instead of walking past it. She stood in the empty gallery for a moment. Landon came through the side entrance at 8:15 with coffee for 2, and the easy stride of someone who no longer felt like a visitor in the building he owned. He handed her one of the cups without being asked. "You fixed the Hartwell lights," she said. "You told me to." "I told you to fix the Fenner landing." "I fixed everything." He stood beside her looking down the east hall. "There's also something in the conservation room, when you have a moment." She went at 9 after the caterers arrived and Nora had the floor map situation under control. The conservation room was quiet and cool, used for documentation and condition assessments. On the main work table, weighted flat, was a single sheet of paper, a contract header. She looked at it. Alara Gallery, Design Consultation Agreement, her name. A scope of work covering exhibition layout, spatial flow assessment, and client environment consultation for 3 upcoming installations. A start date 3 weeks out. "This isn't an employment contract," she said when she heard him come in behind her. "No, it's a consulting agreement. Different thing." He stopped beside her. "You told me luxury isn't closed, it's controlled. You relocated a painting because you understood traffic movement better than the installation team. I asked the contracts department to draft this the week after the Fenner situation." She turned to look at him. "That was 6 weeks ago. I was waiting." "For what?" He looked at her steadily. "For you to stop thinking you had to earn the right to be in a room you already made better." The conservation room was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, the caterers were having a cheerful disagreement about the canape order. She looked back at the contract. She read it once carefully, the way she read everything. Then she folded it once along the center and placed it in the inside pocket of her jacket. "I'll have notes on the December layout by Thursday," she said. "I'd expect nothing else." She turned to go. "Claire." She stopped. "After tonight," he paused, choosing words with more care than usual. "There's a place on Larchmont that has good coffee and no connection to this building. I'd like to take you there." She considered him for a moment. The way he stood, the way he'd adjusted every light in the East Hall without being reminded, the way he'd said her name the first time, like it was something he was being careful with. "After the preview," she said. "After the preview." She walked back to the main floor, where the morning light was coming through the Beaux-Arts windows at exactly the angle that made the Hartwell sing, and the gallery was beginning to fill with the particular hum of a day that was going to be worth the trouble of getting up for.